Yes, thank you very much, Robert. I just want to say something very brief. Actually, I've read recently a survey about artificial intelligence was just published, I guess, last week or something like, which is revealing the fact that this technology has significantly increased incomes for many use cases. And also very interesting, 65% of the companies which are working with artificial intelligence feels comfortable taking risks with artificial intelligence investment. And this is incredible. 65% feels comfortable. And also more than 70% of supply chain management teams are achieving revenue increases year over year based on artificial intelligence adoption. But one of the important issues as well here, they mentioned that they need more standards. This is one of, let's say, the missing things connected with artificial intelligence. Many companies are not following standards to build artificial intelligence tools, for instance. So I guess we highlighted, actually, we took in consideration some standards coming from IEEE. Sergio mentioned very well. We also, yes, have some details about this family of standards as to the end of our report. So if, yes, we have some, no?
Well, listen, if I might just pick up on that question of standards, standards can be a two-edged sword, I suppose. On the one hand, they can help with innovation because they provide a baseline that everybody can operate with, and particularly in a context like energy, it's very important to be able to interoperate between different providers, and in the European context across borders as well. But they can also stifle innovation because either the standard becomes too expensive for a small or new operator to work with, or in some contexts, they might involve intellectual property that you can't easily get access to. And so in general, I think standards can be quite a good thing, but I just raise, I suppose, one concern, which is similar to the concern that I raised in my little presentation as well. I don't know very much about the development of energy standards, and perhaps those of you who have participated in that might know a bit more about it, but I have supervised some research on the development of standards in other areas, such as disability and technology. And what does seem to happen in that context is that the major technology companies have an advantage because they simply have much better resources, and civil society, smaller groups, are not able to engage in the process. They often don't speak that technical language that's required, and they don't have the sufficient bodies essentially to be able to attend meetings and continue to review drafts and so on and so forth. So I think we need to think about, and again, like my presentation, I don't have easy solutions, but I think we need to think about how, if we are developing standards for AI in the energy sector and maybe in other sectors as well, if what we've done here has implications for the other sectors, how do we do that in a way that ensures that everybody at all levels is able to participate and engage fully?
Yes, I'm completely agree with you, and I will give you two examples. 2 years ago, I participated to a conference in Canada, and I talked to some people from industry, and they told me that in Canada it's almost impossible, to control the data coming from smart meters, because the citizens are afraid of. Okay, so they need to know precisely, yes, where, yes, the data is is coming from, and these DSO companies, what they are doing with, actually, with the data. If I compare with Norway, for instance, we have a very good example here connected with one of the islands. And so the people are trusting in DSO. DSO is able to manage everything, yes. And based on they designed it and developed some tools. They came to explain to the citizens, okay, these tools, yes, are doing this and that, and based on this, yes, you can get some benefits. You can get yes, more the efficiency. Yes, we are able to improve the efficiency if we control the heating, if we have a total control, if we control the water in your house. We can tell you, okay, based on our tools, yes, if you want to get more money, if you want to improve something, yes, you have these choices, you have these options. But I guess it's depending on yes, many different issues here. Sergio, maybe yes, you can yeah, comment on this. In Italy is a different story for sure.
But I agree that obviously, we highlighted the benefit that I can have. Then obviously one thing is, let me say, the community that is developing AI technology, that is the community typical of research center, of R&D, of big industry. Then another is the adoption through the citizen in a pervasive way. And obviously there the acceptance of the technology is not that easy. Also, let me say, in terms of standards, you know that still today, if you have the shape of the plug is different from one European nation to the other, is not exactly. Also, for example, one of the issue for recharging the car is that the plug for the recharger are completely different. So for sure will be not easy. Maybe in that direction, I agree that one important role that has to be done from the public authorities is making an explainable and trustable AI. So really explain the benefits that can come and see that is not seen AI as a threat or a dividing technology, but it's an opportunity. And maybe, as already highlighted by Afzal, maybe since obviously, at the beginning there is, let me say, this increasing effort to be done, maybe some policy of making incentives to ease the adoption. Maybe this can be something that can ease this integration, since obviously every time a new technology appears, is someone is scared of that, particularly if obviously in terms also of culture, while for the digital native technologies and people, so young people, maybe AI is understandable. You have a lot of generation that were already difficulty to be used with the digitization. For AI is even much complex. So obviously it's a process that is not easy. Incentives can be done. Obviously communication aspects are really important to be adopted. And in terms of regulation, I think that the increased standardization should come as soon as the TRL increases, since a strict standardization in the beginning can stop the R&D activities and maybe can easy big industry that can afford the big investment, but then it's more difficult for startup to rise. So maybe it's something that as soon as the AI adoption increases maturity, is becoming pervasive, maybe more and more you can increase the standardization effort, and maybe you can start from light standards, so you can define the basic principle, so that more or less the regulatory rules, the approach is not completely different from Norway to Italy to Spain to Ireland. And then as soon as this enter, you start making more regulation. This is another aspect, obviously, of Europe that is I believe in United States of Europe, like United States of US, but obviously then we see that each each nation is proud of its culture and heritage, and so there are some regulatory problems to be solved. So I think the it's not easy to travel, but I think that we highlighted that there are maybe more benefits than threats. So if we are able to face these threats, then we will have the benefit of this technology. And then is in the nature of Europe, where, let me say, is a nation where industry is based on advanced technology rather than on the low cost of the workers, that if you go in this direction, since obviously this is something that can empower the European industry and make it more competitive in the worldwide market.
Yes, thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah, if I could just touch upon some of the aspects that Robert raised about engagement with other sectors and what Ronan said, and to some extent what Sergio said about the standards and the extent to which they might be stifling. I think I completely see that point of view, where the burden of auditing, for example, it could even be something mundane like financial auditing. It's kind of fine to bear for a big investment bank, but not for like a startup, right? So then you're like, by having standards, you're actually stifling the startups. Well, here in Stockholm, specifically, and Sweden in general, there is a culture, there's a startup culture. At least they're trying to foster a startup culture where people are working for themselves, and that's great. And you can have new businesses starting up, but they still have to comply with all of the tax regulations. They still have to comply with the social insurance payments and so on. That for a big company or a university is not a problem. So what I have seen is that in order to facilitate this, there is a kind of another startup, if you will, that sits over these startups, a kind of an aggregator. So they take care of all this paperwork for you. So this also enables you to avoid the issue of having too much of a burden, because somebody else is able to assume the risk or to pool the characteristics. And I think in that sense, the regulation could also try to encourage this kind of activity to take place, to have another layer that sits between the regulator and the actual decision makers and handles and absorbs a lot of these risks. Just like in a very mundane sense, an electric vehicle aggregator will do that for you. You don't have to think about when I plug in my car and when I drive it. You just get a signal on your app because the aggregator has taken care of all this kind of risk. So maybe that tries to tie together a bit of what was said earlier.
Definitely to create new technologies and tools based on artificial intelligence, machine learning, digitalization, yes, is one of the key factors, I guess. So we started defining this objective. Yes, okay, to create an AI global framework, yes, with practical recommendations and obligations, yes, based on laws, standards, and ethical principles. Yeah. So we started from this point. We define it after that step by step, connected with each key requirement. We defined some activities. We defined some applications. We selected some applications, and we highlighted to the end some recommendations based on case studies. So also, as I mentioned before, 65% of the companies, based on this survey, feels comfortable, yes, taking the risk with artificial intelligence. So I guess that's a big step forward. But as Robert said, okay, we have to highlight the benefits very clear. And yes, of course, adopting regulations and yeah, and these tools, yeah, should be based on. Okay, if you want to add something something else in conclusion.
Lucian, I might just ask a question really of Afzal. I was just intrigued by the focus on incentives in the presentation. I don't know that I have a particularly clear question on it, but I suppose it's a very different way of looking at this space to the way that I would tend to look at it. I think lawyers, every discipline has a hammer that it tends to use to hit the nails that it sees. And lawyers' traditional way of solving a problem is to ban it. so we tend to focus on prohibiting things rather than encouraging them. I mean, I'm simplifying, and we don't, you know, we do, I think, sometimes try to encourage particular activity, but it's not the way we normally think. So just in the context, I suppose, of AI in the energy sector and maybe more broadly, Afzal, I'm just curious to know, like, what incentives do you see that could be created? I suppose what I'm asking is what do you see as the policy implications of that? Is that a thing where you think the laws should be changed? Is that a thing where you think there should be tax incentives, or are there other things? I'm just curious as to how economics thinks about this question of incentives in this space.
Well, yes. I mean, I would re-emphasize the issue of market failures in this context, where there are benefits to be had from adopting certain technologies, but nobody individually feels that it's worthwhile to proceed with that. Or it might be the other way around, where the only adopter is someone who already is large enough, like you were alluding to earlier, Ronan, in terms of circumventing or being able to absorb regulatory requirements, is large enough to absorb the risk and then is becoming even more entrenched in the marketplace. So somewhere in between those two extremes is where we would like to end up. You know, having the perfect outcome is never going to be possible, because you may want the technology to be adopted without facilitating market power, but the only entities who can adopt it are the ones who are already large enough. So then you have to be nimble enough to anticipate how these entrenched players are already going to have more leverage in the market as a result of adopting that technology, and try to limit that as much as possible while still making it attractive for them to adopt the technology so that society overall can benefit. And this is kind of a motif of the work of Jean Tirole, who won the Nobel Prize in 2014 for economics. And he did a lot of his work in electricity, telecommunications, you know, like these big network-based industries where you're gonna have entities with market power. There's not really much you can do about it because of the economies of scale that are involved. And he was trying to find that middle ground between having this market power and having no new technology at all. So I think that's kind of where we need to be looking at, to try to anticipate to understand their incentives well enough so that then we can anticipate how they will be magnified with the adoption of the new technology. So we can still get the technology in there without making it worse for society.
Yes, that's right. But also, if I'm looking at what the companies, why the companies are using AI as a tool, yes, for generating value, but also, most importantly, I guess, in the form of incomes. So I do believe that the laws and regulations are extremely important. So here, in my opinion, should be very clear. You know, we have to interconnect somehow the technology with the regulations, and taking in consideration also, yes, you know, the ethics, laws, regulation, standards, ethical principles as well. I think we have to put in balance all together. when we have to take decisions. That's my opinion. Okay, guys, I would like to say thank you very much one more time. It was a great pleasure to work with you this year, to talk to you. And yes, I do believe that we can continue our work. Yes, and definitely, as I suggested, we can convert a little bit this report into kind of chapter in a book or something like this. Because yes, we made a good work in my opinion, and why not to share it with yes researchers and yes, our community as well. And yes, thank you very much, Robert. I would like to say connected with benefits also, you have right, hydrogen technology connected with energy storage systems is a very, very hot subject, and definitely, yes, will be included in everything connected with the energy sector in the future. Okay, thank you very much. And if, yes, you want to say something in conclusion, or?
Just a thanks to you and to the group for I think this nice activity that also I think added value was mixing different background, more technical engineering background like me and you, Lucian, and more related to economical aspect and lawyer aspect with Ron and Afzal. So I think this is since obviously this kind, if really technology has to serve people, really you need mixing as emerged from this discussion the different aspects, and so acceptance of the technology and the integration of the technology within the regulation, economy, social lives, culture of the EU citizen. And thanks to a lot of history, it's obviously a complex system. So I think that we can continue on that and help making Europe further strong and relevant in this field. Okay, so thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Definitely, yes, we have to make it. And my conclusion is that we can work together very well. It doesn't matter the experience, it doesn't matter the history. We proved here that engineers, economists, lawyers can work very well together. Politicians, why not? Okay, so thank you very much one more time. It was a pleasure. And if everything has been done, yes, okay, I would say that, yes, we arrived to the end of this session.
Yes, thank you from my side for the effective collaboration and participation in this working group, and thank you, Robert, for your suggestions as well.
I'd echo that as well. It was as I said, an interesting and enjoyable experience. It was a particularly challenging time and context to be working on something like this when we couldn't meet physically. We were distributed, but we managed to make it work somehow. And I'd particularly echo the point that Lucien made there. In my own teaching and to the extent that I can in my research, I stress the importance of these cross-disciplinary conversations. I think they're really very important if we're going to deal with these kinds of big challenges, because it's perspectives that I have on these issues are not by themselves complete. Obviously, these are very complex socio-technical systems we're talking about essentially, and we need all those different range of expertise, and it can be difficult, I think, sometimes to figure out what the other person is saying, to understand the language that's being used. But we stuck at it, and I think we produced a report which I hope will be of use in the future.
Okay, thank you very much one more time, and keep in touch, and all the best then.